health. And just note that we are starting to be recorded for the purposes of record keeping for the city. I don't see any guests, but welcome all. It's good to see you all. And let's just go around and let's say one thing that's inspired you recently about the community. What's one thing in the community or about the community that's been inspiring? Just do a little sound bite. Anyone want to start? Or do I have to help? All right, Alan.
I had a little fundraiser at my house, and these are for we do a lot of things with refugees in war refugees, orphans from from the Sudan, and they're in Kenya, to get them out of the refugee camp. And I invited a lot of people, and sadly, not as many showed up. But then the response from the people that was there after they met one of the, I don't know, you can look this up, they're called Lost Boys. 7 years old, he ran, thousands of them ran for their lives. So people stepped up, and we probably got about $9,000 from a small group of people to help get some of the refugee kids out and keep them in college. So that was a good thing in our community.
It's great, yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Anyone else want to share out? Steve?
Bike to Work Week, the booth that the city managed was a terrific success, I thought. A lot of traffic going through, and a tunnel's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and over 200 people through our booth.
Yeah,
That's cool.
and fairly diverse crew too.
Yeah.
So that was good.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Anyone else want to share out? Miguel?
Yeah, I'll second on that tunnel being done. I mean, less construction on Sheridan's been nice. So, I know 70 seconds next, but yeah, it's, I get it. It's construction time of the year, but and also we got a little bit of rain,
Yeah.
right? So the drought numbers are super encouraging. And hopefully we can stay in that, like, not drought conditions for a while. Maybe through the rest of the year would be great.
Great. Anyone else care to share?
Well, I don't know if it's about our community or not, but I'm in a book study circle, and we're doing Poverty by America is the name of the book. And very interesting analysis, very research-based, fact-based look at poverty in America. And one of the conclusions of it is that a lot of poverty and the things that are related to poverty, which is lack of affordable housing and so on, really can be ameliorated, if not completely wiped out, at least be ameliorated by integration.
Mm-hmm.
But we still live in a segregated society, both economically and racially and in other ways. And that it's the case he lays out is that it's a doable thing if we have the will to do it. So
Really cool. Thank you.
As the author is.
I don't remember.
What was it called again? I'll Google it.
Poverty by America.
It's the same guy who wrote about Milwaukee. I should know it.
Right.
Matthew Desmond.
That sounds like a writer's name.
Black cover.
I don't know. I'm reading it on.
Oh.
I don't know what the cover looks like.
What the cover might look
Same
like.
cover as all the books I read.
Right. Anyone else want to share? Michelle, hello. Hope you're well. I know you're in virtual land.
I am. I'm actually parking now, and I'll be joining you in person in just a second.
Good. This will be maybe the first time we've had quite a majority of us here in person, I think, for a while. So, yeah, well, welcome. Rich, may I share about your day today? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. Rich's birthday today.
Happy birthday. You wanted to spend it with us?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be honored. I'd be honored that you wanted to spend it with us, Rich.
We actually celebrated last night.
Okay.
Had feeding time.
Oh,
I got a steak out of it. That's not just cake.
there you go. Good, the good stuff.
And following this, a beer, a wine, anything?
I don't do beer and wine, but
Ah,
Well, we're grateful for you. Hope you had a lovely day.
thank you.
All right.
Spend it in the studio.
Yeah, yeah. I know, that is a lovely day,
Best
right?
kind of day.
Okay, so we do have a special guest with us. And this person is probably a person who is sort of the most aligned to our work as far as city, besides, of course, the great Cody and all that you all do. But officially, our equitable process coordinator, Armando Martin, has been on, you've been here now for,
December 5th.
yeah, so
I think
it's
we
been.
met in October.
Yeah, yeah. So I was honored to be a part of the interview process as a representative of this board. And Armando did such a lovely series of presentations. I know that
There were a
yeah,
number.
Yeah, there were a number. But I know that Cody and I and Armando felt like it would be good for him to just kind of come in and sort of update on the process because, of course, this is an important topic for all of us, right? And we also acknowledge, and this is one of the things, and Armando, I'll share this with you. I mean, this board definitely wants to see this position. We see this position as a long-term piece. But that being said, we're really happy you're here and we're talking about, the amazing work that you're going to do in the next 30 months, which is what you've got, right? So, yeah, no, he reminds us, yeah. So,
Counting down.
Going on 29 months.
yeah.
Years to change.
Yeah, 2.5 years.
If anybody can do it, it's Armando.
Yeah, I agree. So just a welcome and he's here just to kind of share some thinking and get to know some of us. So
How much time did you allot?
you have, we
I gave
typically
you
run about
20
20
minutes.
minutes.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was
Do you want me to
checking.
time you?
Just checking. I'm wondering what Steve's been doing since the TV show Taxi and Back to the Future. That's a compliment.
Two of his favorites, maybe, I don't know.
No, do you remember?
yes.
Is there some similarity there, isn't there? Christopher Lloyd?
I don't see
Yeah,
that.
yeah. If
I
you,
better watch it again.
How's it going?
Yeah.
Looks like a lot like Steve to me.
Jim and Taxi, if any of you remember the
Oh,
TV
yeah.
show Taxi.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it looks like there's more boomers here than Generation X or Z, whatever that was. And our millennials aren't showing up here tonight either. But in the seventies, oh, that's right.
That's right,
Well,
yeah.
nice.
In the seventies, this well-known show Taxi. All Taxi, Danny DeVito's in it. They're having this, and Judd Hirsch, they're having this profound conversation. And they're debating what's right and what's wrong. And Jim shows up and he's kind of the head in the group. He's been on too many drugs and had too many trips. And he comes in very profound. He says, well, look, I don't know what's right and I don't know what's wrong. I don't even know what's going on. He looks at everybody and anyway, my name is Armando. Nice meeting you, Michelle. I'm from Lakewood, Colorado. That's where I live now. I went to school at Bear Creek High School. My teachers in Southwest Denver, Valverde Elementary, and at Rishel Junior High School on Alameda and Tejon didn't give me much of a chance. In fourth grade, Mrs. Morgan said, "You're not a very good artist." So I stopped doing art. Fifth grade, Mr. Gregowitz said, "You're not very good at math." So I lived up to that expectation. In sixth grade, Mr. Berg said, "You can't carry a note, Armando." So I stopped singing. Seventh grade, Mr. Gregowitz said, whatever his class was, "You're not very good at that either." I think it was English. So I stopped writing. none of those people were black or brown. And they just kind of gave up on me. Little did they know that because other white friends believed in me, opened up doors when I was 18 years old to a radio station here called KLAK, the best of country western. And when I was in fourth grade, I knew at that time I really wanted to be in radio, and here's how I got into the business. 14 years old, we went to the Wiener Schnitzel over on Garrison in Colfax. And my two friends, a brother and a sister, I give them $2 for my chili cheese dog, and the brother and sister gave me coupons. And I said, "What are those?" And they said, "Well, our father gave it to us." And I said, "But what are they?" And they said, I said, "What does he do?" "He works in radio." and then I said, "What does he do?" "He sells airtime." I didn't know what that was, but I knew I wanted to do it. And at 18, he helped me get into KLAK radio. It was such a gas, and proceeded to work in different broadcast stations in Idaho and Utah, which took me into marketing positions, marketing director. I ended up at Western Union running a $1.6 billion business unit responsible for the whole P&L operations system, marketing. It was awesome. And then a few years later, I was at Franklin Covey for this international training company. And they would call me every now and then from where I was working in Salt Lake, and they'd say, "Armando," a friend of mine would say, "Hey, they want to talk to you about opening Mexico." So I'd run over there. A few months later, they'd call me back. I'd run over, kind of like I was doing with Westminster. And eventually they said, "Well, Armando is the general manager of Mexico and Latin America. You're going to have to train these programs, productivity, leadership." And my friend Rick was there, who I'd known for many years. And they said, "What do you think about that?" I said, "Well, if Rick could do it, I think I could do it." The first time I went to Mexico to give one of these trainings, it was on the 1st of November. I had not seen the time management program taught completely. There wasn't a manual in Spanish yet. And they said, "Well, you got to go down and teach this to people from General Electric in Mexico City." It had been about 10 years that I had been there. I got there that evening at the Hotel Presidente in Chapultepec Park, a lovely hotel. And I didn't know where the training was going to take place the following day. And the seminar, I had not seen it completely. It was the next day, it was just like, well, the only good news is by tomorrow night, it'll be over. A lot of pressure. In the morning, about 8:30, somebody called and said, "Hey, I'll come by and pick you up, and we'll go over to the hotel where the training was going to go on." 3 years later, fast forward, I went from just being terrible and putrid to, after a 3-year period with Franklin Covey, I became a world-class trainer. It was brutal. It was terrible. You'd be in a room presenting to all these professional trainers. You were being videotaped, and they would tell you everything you were doing wrong. It was rough, but it helped me be able to get in front of a group of 12 or a group of 1,200. So 3 years later, we have a very successful, thriving business in Mexico. Another chance to do some training with General Electric in Monterrey. And he said to the salesperson, I was in the meeting, he said, "We really want to do this, but they don't want the person who was here about 3 years ago." Yeah, you don't want that person. So over the years, I've been able to have opportunities that exceeded my teachers' expectations. In some ways, that taught me persistence. Happily, Steve Jobs invented something called the iPad, which was my medium. It wasn't so intimidating like paper and things were costly. If I didn't like it, as an advertising agency owner, my creative director, he would give me some help and assistance. He was an artist. And I said, "Well, how do you like this?" And he said, "Armando, you've created something that's original. No one else has that." And so it taught me a powerful lesson. And then suddenly I found myself writing as the multicultural marketing expert, a column for Progressive Grocer Magazine, Convenience Store News. And I became that featured writer where my teacher said, "You're not a very good writer, Armando. You're not a very good artist." And it takes time and persistence, resilience, resourcefulness. So somebody mentioned something, if you have the will, and it was you, Rich. We can do anything. There's nothing that white people can't do. I grew up in retail, marketing and advertising, Kroger, Albertsons, and worked with Walmart, a lot of multinational manufacturers, Procter and Gamble, Coke, Kellogg's, Post Foods, Kraft, just about anybody you would say in an aisle going up and down your local King Supers, we've worked with them. I saw these executives do whatever they wanted. Others would say, "Hey, I need this budget to do a program." They said, "We're in the middle of the budget season. You'll have to wait till next year." But if the executives wanted to do it, "Hey, we're going to start an organic line." It could be in the middle of the year, and they found money for it. They could do whatever they wanted. When it came to multicultural marketing and advertising, and they invited me out to Cincinnati, me and my business partner at Excel Edge, we were making a pitch. The CMO liked us. That's key in this business, if someone likes you. We have to state our opinion, but we better make sure we're not offending that guy in the corner office who doesn't look like us. They're the gatekeeper. We have one of those here at the City of Westminster. 1 and +3 +4, and Chris Lindsay now is +5. So we have our gatekeepers. Everybody believed in diversity. Armando, we have our values up there on the wall. There's one for integrity. There's one there for inclusion. There's one there for diversity. We believe in that. Well, that's good. And there'd be a table like this, and everybody was white. And we'd be making the presentations, and everybody was just loving the diversity. And we have a black guy in here. We got a Mexican in here, and we're progressive. We're sophisticated because they don't want to be viewed as hillbillies or backwards. None of us want that. And everything was going along smooth until somebody said, "Hey, wait, hang on just a minute. Did Armando just say they need a $5 million budget to do this work?" That's where the rubber hit the road. Armando's going to take 20 minutes in this meeting? We got important stuff we got to talk about. They minimized their own customer base. Their fastest growing markets for Albertsons and for Kroger is in Boise, Idaho. It's not up in South Dakota. It's wherever there's Mexicans. And I say Mexicans because 80% of their footprint of Latinos are Mexican. Wherever Mexicans were, that was their largest ticket per basket. Los Angeles was a monster. Anybody who isn't making it in LA, it doesn't matter what, New York, Miami, DC, Houston, Chicago is contributing. If you're not making it there, you're not making it. So we were trying to help them in their business. But Armando, $5 million? And then it grew to $10 million. And they finally realized we have to invest in this market. That's what the City of Westminster is doing. And even when I started, there's another agenda item that's going on. Do we just want to do diversity to prepare for the day we get sued? We can at least point to, here's the guy that's running diversity. Talk to Armando. This isn't unlike any other organizations. That happens everywhere, including Fortune 20 companies like Kroger. They start with that as a primary agenda item. pay them something and as long as it's not too much, we can at least say, check that box. We've got an agent for diversity. We have a multicultural ad agency. If it wasn't for Evan Anthony, the CMO, we wouldn't have gotten in. It takes an enlightened, and I'll say this, I come from a different perspective, everybody. I don't come from the traditional HR background for diversity, and I'm not an academic. For me, it is the rubber hits the road of what are you investing in the market? Who are you paying here in this organization that looks like me over $250,000 a year? That's why I say Walmart's better at DEI work than anybody. And usually I get shocked looks because of the 10,000. Walmart has 10,000 lawsuits filed against them at any given point. A lot of that is over racial kinds of things or harassment of some kind. But they, more than anybody else that I know, pay lots of dark people over $250,000 a year to work there. So I say, bravo. You're putting your money where your mouth is. Does that make sense to anybody?
Mm-hmm.
That means more to me than what you've got up on the wall hanging. Even though their board is still primarily white, they're paying and promoting people in an equitable way. I'll finish with this and take any questions you might have, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here at the city. Where I grew up, there at Valverde Elementary on Tejon and Alameda. Does anybody remember that? Are you guys all here from Denver? Most everybody?
Not me.
Not for a while.
Well, I am now.
Rich?
I've been here about 35 years.
Okay, so this is really going back up to the 60s.
Yeah.
Alameda and Tejon, when I went to school there, about a third of the population was Latino and primarily Mexican. There wasn't anybody there from Guatemala or Venezuela or Colombia. Many of us were second and third generation, and there were a few first generation arrivals. So most of us had been there for a while. I had my white friends. 2/3 of the school was white. Steven Sekovic was a dear friend of mine. Osmond, Osmond, ASMUND or something like that, not like Donnie and Marie. Then we started busing in 1969. So Black kids came in. This was then a third Black, a third white, a third Latino. Yeah, all these years later, you guys, I went to Bristol Junior High, right up the street from Alameda, and spoke to 3 5th-grade classes. There wasn't one blonde-haired person or blue-eyed child in that class. There were 2 North African refugee children, and the rest were little Latinos. Assuming most of them were Mexican, maybe some Guatemalan, Central Americans. And it confirmed to me what I've suspected, and you said it, Rich, we don't integrate.
Mhm.
We segregate ourselves. Birds of a feather flock together. We go to where we're comfortable. That's human nature. We select our executive teams by what we're comfortable with. That's why so many executive committees are white. I went to school with Frank. He's a good guy. I golf with Bob. I was on the board at Denver Health Hospital Authority. And they had this huge gala. Big money, high rollers. And then they introduced to us the philanthropist of the year. And they had videos and these big screens. And they were nominating a jewelry owner. And they had people introduce why they thought he was such a great guy. First one says, hey, I met so-and-so on the golf course at Cherry Hills, and he's a great guy. Then Hickenlooper comes up. Hick says, I met so-and-so playing cards. He's a great guy. And I turned over to my friend Franklin Rios and I said, Franklin, we're not at the card game. We're shut out. That doesn't feel good. Doesn't feel good for white poor people, right? And middle class people. It's exclusivity. It's elitist. We're shut out of that. We're just regular working folks here. Black, brown, or white, male or female. Michael Jordan comes on the scene and Pepsi says, with Gatorade, brilliant, I want to be like Mike. 30 years ago, I want to be like Mike. After Michael's done with his career, be you black, brown, white, old or young, I saw Andy Lyde, our head of training here, wearing his Nike Blazers. His 14-year-old daughter suggested that the whole family get white blazer Nike shoes for their pictures. Michael becomes a phenomenon. This poor kid from North Carolina is elevated to, we wanted to be like Mike. I had somebody that just came back from Mexico and there was a certain incident. And I said, it's just interesting. White people love our food, our beaches, our art, our culture, our music, our dance. They just don't like Mexicans. It was a tirade that somebody from Lakewood that was caught on social media just cussing out these Mexicans at the pool. Go back to where you're from. Embarrassing for everybody. So now, 60 years later, since I was a child at Alameda and Tejon, there are hardly any white faces down there. So here's what that means. To me, as a marketer and an observer of behavior, so I know how to inspire people to buy more stuff. Here's what it tells me is that it took 60 years, and it's been longer since the first brown person entered that area. My grandmother was from there, so she was born in 1915. So let's say in 100 years, the first dark family moves into the neighborhood, and the 100 years it took for the last white family to shut off the lights and leave. We didn't live together. It's simply, how long does it take for that first dark family to get in, and how long is it going to take? In that case, down there in Southwest Denver, it took 100 years to where, I don't know if the last family has left, but it's getting close. And then a little further west, white families start moving in and dark families start moving out. That gentrification that happens. And I know when that happens, when I see that white woman walking the dog and taking a stroller out, and I said, the change is starting. Any questions? Comments?
Well, I know that America is, part of we have a caste system. Of course, I'm actually reading Wilkerson's book called Caste. And it really does point out a lot of things that we've known. And we are segregated. We are tribes. And it's trying to get the tribes to agree with one and meet and talk with one another, to learn about their cultures. I think that's one of the things here in the Inclusivity Board, just trying to reach out and get all those different Westminster tribes, because we have a lot of them. People don't understand. And one of the things I point out is one day I was in city council meeting, and there's a bunch of kids. It was the youth advisory board. And I'm seeing the kids who are, I guess, sick or Sikh, however you pronounce it. And I had no idea, because I live in this part of Westminster or in Southwest Adams County, is where my kids went to school. And look around and just say, this is something new to me. But it seems to be the group tends, as you talk about segregation, the group tends to be more north. And it's probably, I guess the north is a wealthier area than here.
I think, you know, what I'm hearing, that's probably not your intention, but part of what I'm hearing is, you know, the idea that, we white folks tend to think segregation is about everybody else. It's not. The most segregated group in America are white. Because we go somewhere and we put up virtual walls. Sometimes we put up literal walls.
Mhm.
To keep other people out.
Yeah.
So who's really segregated? You
Well-
know, if I look at my circle of friends,
Uh-huh.
you know, speaking generally anyway, you know, how many of my friends look like me? You know, and how many, you know, have a darker complexion or come from a different country or,
Mhm.
you know, I think most of us look at that and see that we are in fact segregated.
Mhm.
It's us.
I think it's interesting, Alan, that you use the word tribe because we're human. Tribalism is innate. And I feel like our job as an inclusivity board is to redefine what a tribe is. And I think one of the things that I was hoping that we might be able to talk about later is, you know, what we can do with our budget. And I had mentioned in the last meeting about the possibility of helping to fund neighborhood gatherings. Because, for example, I'm going to take my neighborhood as a great example where we have an interesting blend of people. We do still have a majority of white folks, but then we have folks, I have a Persian family, I have a Filipino family, I have a couple from Hong Kong who have been here in Colorado for 40 years. We don't socialize together. And that's something that I feel is a missed opportunity to redefine what a tribe is. Because we can make our little neighborhood block our own little tribe by bringing everybody together and connecting on a very personal level. So, you know, so things like that, I think we can make changes by redefining what these groups can be. So I just wanted to point that out. I feel like that's something that anybody working in DEI is trying to essentially do that, right? You're trying to make your workplace more diverse. You're trying to create ways to get your workforce, you know, working together, to recognizing the human in your fellow coworker, that type of thing. It's the toughest job that anybody's going to ever have to do, because you are, to kind of the point you're making and the point that you just made, which is we have had decades of practice in defining tribes in a very specific way, which I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's, you know, we skin color is the easy one, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's a visual definition. You know, accents, audible definition that you're different, you know, that type of thing. So anyway, I just wanted to just sort of raise that because I'm very much, I still have to read that book. That is like, it's on my list.
It's actually fairly easy to read because it's more like each one's an essay, each one, and then you move on to the next essay.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah, but I'm
It's a good-
obsessed by like this idea of tribalism because it really is innate. You see it in kids, you see it in adults, and it's different environmental factors that affect how each group defines itself. And I feel like there is the possibility of changing that over time.
So Armando, if you had to make one change in city government, because that's your focus now, what do you think that would be and how can we support you?
Yep.
That
That's the
effort?
question. What can we do to help you?
Barbara Walters asked Billy Graham that question. If he could change anything, what would he change? And I was waiting to hear cure for cancer. the AIDS epidemic was really raging at that time. And he said race. Not to make everybody white, but just eliminate the context we have around that. Arthur Ashe, the famous tennis player, in his book Days of Grace, talked about being black, a black man in America, and what a burden it was, and the weight that he carried with that, and explaining. And I'll give that. Well, Armando, where are you from? I'm from Denver. Where are your parents from? They're from Denver. Where's your grandfather from? He's from Mexico. And it wasn't until I said 3 of my grandparents were born in Mexico that they finally said, "Oh, all right, that makes sense." You can't snap. If you snapped at everything like that, you'd never be able to help other people. So some of the answer is found there with what Arthur Ashe was saying. He said, I know why Aetna chose me to be a board member. I'm black and I'm famous and I'm an athlete. And he said, but I'll take it because I can't make changes on the inside. If we're on the outside, we can't help make changes. So I got to be inside. And I got to embrace my brothers and sisters who may not look like me or not enlightened. And realize that we have advocates and detractors for any initiative that we try. If it's new IT system, there's going to be advocates and detractors, but we're also interested in those in the middle. Some of those that may come along with us, and that's kind of politics, right, as well. If we can find those people in the middle, that'll help win the day. I suppose it would be that each of us stand when we see repression, that we stand and make a statement and say something about it. Here at the city, I give the city A+ for willingness and disposition. I give us a B into, are we going to stand and actually say something and do something and make an effort versus, and so what I try to do here is share this message with everybody. That with city management, this isn't my program, this is your program. And that doesn't exclude me. I'm here to help and stand by you and help lead the way when I need to. But it's really your program you're investing in. So that's one of the things I try to do. And I'll leave you with this thought. I try to teach, invite, and encourage. I don't want to mandate training. There may be something coming from the training program that's on DEI next year, but that's going to come from them. That's going to be organic. The memos that are written here about the subject usually come from someone else other than me. I tend not to use the word DEI because it's repellent, or the acronym. It repels white people because they're tired of being the target. It repels dark people because they're tired of being blamed and the finger pointed at them, that this is why we're having DEI training because you're overly sensitive. We don't want that either. So what we try to do is come through the back door or come from the side door. Again, nobody wants to be told that they're a bigot. I don't want to be told that I'm a bigot, even though I have bigotry tendencies in my life. I had a conversation today with someone and I said, I learned a lot from 12 steps, how to have an honest conversation. To admit, here's my addiction. Hi, my name's Armando. I'm an addict. And to hear other people say the same thing. And if we change that to, hi, I'm Armando and I'm a bigot, the power that would come from that. It would release that energy that's there behind bigotry and prejudice as we started acknowledging, yeah, I'm a bigot, and here was my act this past week where I showed my bigotry. Versus what was that good thing we did this week? If I could say, hey, I'm Armando, I'm a bigot. Here's something where it proved my bigotry. And when you have honest conversations, the shame and the power behind, the force behind that starts to dissipate because I'm not alone. Because in America now, if you were to say that, if you're a white man that says something like that, you have hell to pay. And so to shut off the conversation is such a negative thing. I'd like to know the person that wrote a 9-page letter here at the city that was totally against diversity. I want to hear from that individual. Why he or she feels that way. Our HR director moved from rural Georgia, and being the person I am, in our first discussion, I had to ask, we're doing this with diversity. Where are you at with that? And he began to talk about how he emerged from a prejudiced family. And they told him when he was in 7th grade, hey, don't worry about Black kids going to that school because as long as we're here, and I'm sure the words were different than Black kids, they'll never be allowed to go to that school. So don't worry about that. And we had a long conversation about how he emerged. Yeah, we put too much emphasis and focus on the color of somebody's skin and race. All of us, Black, brown, and white people. In Mexico, it's interesting. There's only been 2 dark presidents. Benito Juarez and the current president. Everybody else has been white. There's just something to the superiority of white people that is misguided. I'm not sure where that
It's
superiority
been
comes from.
embedded for
Comes from
hundreds of
imperialism in a lot
years.
of ways, right?
Colonialism.
Yeah.
I don't even think they used the word really race until in America, the blacks,
Yeah.
slaves were here. And just like you said, it's easy to identify people.
Absolutely.
I think psychologically, they say when you see somebody coming toward you, the first thing you see is the color of their skin. The second thing you see is gender. The third thing you see is age. And that's just a thing to where you're trying to size people up.
And then we try to put meaning behind it and context. Well, they're older, it must mean this.
It's safer if they're older. I don't have to worry about, you don't have to worry about that. You're just having another young birthday. Somebody sees me coming, there's nothing to be concerned about. It's an older guy coming.
Oh, hey, old man.
Or boomer.
Miguel, ¿qué piensas?
It's interesting. I mean, these conversations, I think for me, there's just a lot of pain that I feel every time these conversations happen because I've seen it over and over again. And it's interesting, like the sizing up, right? Like you may think from your perspective, you may be thinking about like race, age, and gender. But that person that is coming the other way to you may be thinking if you're thinking that I'm threatening. And that might trigger a whole nother reaction from you, as opposed to maybe you two gentlemen walking by each other. So it's like, it's always this, like kind of the Arthur Ashe thing. It's always this extra compounding sort of like layers of things you have to think about. And it's exhausting. And then from a psychological perspective, it's painful. So I just, oftentimes for me, my reaction nowadays is just to kind of be quiet during these conversations because I never really feel like they touch a root around pain, right? And I just don't think it's easy to explain that to anybody else unless you experience it. So I just kind of listen to these conversations. They happen at work, they happen amongst friends, they happen in groups settings like this. Church. I mean, all over the place, but it's really, you don't really understand unless you experience it, right? So it's just so tough to articulate even sometimes, because then people are very understanding, but then it's like still not the same amount of understanding as actually going through it. So I just kind of sit back and take these in, and it's always good to hear the comments, but I do feel like there's always something missing. So
it's hard to understand the trauma.
Yeah. I
just wrote an email to the CMO team yesterday that included a couple of traumatic points in my life. If I don't come from love, It could eat me up. During the Chicano movement in the 60s, I was an angry young teenager. Corky Gonzalez helped me find my identity when I needed it because I didn't always fit in Mexico. Even then, I'm a sort of otra clase de gringo. I'm just a different kind of gringo. And here, where did I come from? And to hear my children having gone through that as they were growing up over there in Utah. I mean, my grandfather's been here since the 1500s, his family, since before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In our indigenous roots, we're as American can be, but we're not. I had a friend from Argentina, white, and his family's from England. His name is Underwood. He came here with his 10 kids years ago. And I said, Oscar, your children will be American before my kids. As long as my kids and grandkids and great grandchildren are dark, your white kids, as soon as they drop their accent and with that name Underwood, they're in. But he's less American than I am. It seems doesn't seem unjust. It's unjust. As a young man picking up a girlfriend for a date, uh, her father appeared at the door and said, "My daughter's not going to go out with some damn Mexican." I could hear her in the background in tears. I went home in tears. I was probably 17. My mom said, "What are you doing home so early?" "Over here in Pinehurst." And I told her what happened. And she could have harmed me and injured me. And I would hear my family, aunts and uncles say it. And I'd hear them say, "Hey, I told you couldn't trust white people. You can't trust them, Ramona." She didn't do that. Instead, she helped me learn about my Spanish roots and my indigenous roots. My grandmother's from Mexico City, and her family, still to this day, there are family members who speak Nahuatl, the Aztec language. And she helped me understand that. She said, "Armando, this was not your problem. This man has a problem." So she taught me in a correct way, but it was hard. It's traumatic. And then to see my kids, my son was a McDonald's All-American in Utah, and he's like complected like his mother, and he got hate mail. He was in tears. His hands were shaking when he showed it to me. It was just terrible, vile stuff. So we know the problems. And so what we're trying to do is teach, invite, encourage. We've laid out a plan where we have events frequently. We'll be celebrating as employees. Have you talked about the Belong team?
Not a lot.
Yeah. So there's a team that's really the diversity arm of the city of Westminster. There's about 20 people in the group, and we'll run programs from screening Selma and having an African-American contact come in and handle Q&A for us. The Women of Courage panel in March. We had one of the women was Nita Gonzalez, who was the eldest child of Corky Gonzalez, the civil rights leader. In April, we had the Rabbi Heilman join us down in City Council. That's probably the one that got the most reaction, where people said, "We never thought we would have any kind of Christian discussion, let alone a rabbi talking about the Holocaust in his family." He had the place silent as he started talking about a letter that his dad got from a brother. Cinco de Mayo turned into more of a community event. Next year, we have plans with the Parks Recreation to have a larger community event. Juneteenth and Pride Month, and now we're getting ready for Hispanic Heritage, Day of the Dead, and in between that, celebration for our indigenous brothers and sisters in the community. They're few, but it's one that gets my attention because they've been so mistreated. And out of everybody, whatever we can do, even if there's just a couple of families here, we want to make sure we celebrate and help our employees be aware, create some self-awareness, and be aware of other individuals.
I'm seeing an opportunity here. It's going back to what you were saying, Michelle, about block parties and things like that. And, and hearing you speak about your pain, for example, and I think these are great opportunities for groups to get together and to really talk about issues like this. I mean, maybe it's a large number of people and you break them into, whether it's done at one of the rec centers, and just have people really talking about, just like you said, you've got something from Heilman on that.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I feel all that excited about getting people together to talk about the issue. I think, truthfully, so to give you just the tiniest bit of background, so both of my parents came to this country at different points in their lives. My mom came when she was a teenager, didn't speak English. My father came in his mid-20s, spoke this much English. When they married, they spoke neither person's language, so English was their first language, like to each other. I grew up speaking neither of their languages because they wanted me to pass
To be American.
as American as I could be. And thankfully, my father was German, so I come across as very white. I have no accent, but the thing about the block parties that I like is that my parents struggled as a multiracial couple, but they were adopted by a family that was prominent in the town that we lived in, which was a town of 1,800 people. The rest of them were all bigots. But because this family put their arms around us, my parents thrived. I think it's important to have those social connections rather than just talking about our differences, to erase those differences by embracing each other. So that to me is the importance of these gatherings, is more that than anything else.
I like both the comments, and I would suggest that we live in a world that could be rather than either or, that it could be and, because there are some people who are verbal. We're starting a group of roundtables where we're going to read a book together, and we're going to teach, invite, and encourage for those who want to be there and participate with something like you're talking about, a roundtable and having a discussion, and as well as having a social thing, which we're also doing. So we're trying to create areas of learning and self-awareness in however that comes. So I encourage most of the groups I work with to think about and versus it's either this or it's that. And get behind it. And those are two positive outcomes that would come from that.
Yeah. So how can we support you?
I'll think about that. I'll think about that. Good vibes are always appreciated. Appreciate the chief being here. The chief and I became fast friends over an issue with a resident here in the city, and we got to know each other and collaborating. The people in blue have I don't know if it's rightfully or not, but they said that would be our hardest group to penetrate with these messages. And the fire department has embraced fully. The chief, Hobart, wants to go a little more cautiously before he introduces me to the group at large. And so I'm supporting him how I can, and we'll probably get more aggressive of programming and things we can do for him. In fact, there's an emotional, an EQ program that we're looking at that the city of Dubuque is doing. And I had a conversation with the chief of police there, and it would be interesting, and he's certified in this methodology, and it'd be interesting to get the chief certified. And it's organic, so that's really our approach as well. I'd rather have the chief 100 out of 100 times be the voice for a diversity messages versus me.
Armando, is your work, I mean, your position for the city
Yes,
and the city employees?
yes.
Whereas,
The workforce, yeah.
whereas,
You need to start there.
am I understanding that the rest of us, it's like we're community people?
Correct.
So we're our own tribe in a way.
Armando, so many thoughts. Thank you for coming in and for giving us a story. Miguel, I want to acknowledge too that these conversations can be painful for people that live them. Some of us can turn off our TVs and, you know, and just kind of say, oh yeah, it's a problem. I don't, but as a society, until we truly acknowledge privilege, acknowledge the implicit biases and the explicit biases, frankly, and until we as allies own this work, then we have a long way to go. So I just want to acknowledge that, you know, I don't want to like leave and say, you know, we heard you and thank you for sharing that
Of course.
as a vulnerable point. And of course, I always say anything that we can do to make sure that this is a safe space, a safer space. You know, we're not perfect and we'll acknowledge that. And, but I really, really value the fact that you're present in the city. And as more and more opportunity comes for us to align with your work and support you and cheerlead you in whatever way we can, please count on us to do that.
There's I don't know how extensive your influence is, but there's discussion around a community outreach position. I think that community outreach person should definitely have some clout and leverage within the CMO area.
What is CMO?
City manager.
The city manager.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Thank you.
There's a possibility that that position was already here, and there's a possibility that community outreach liaison goes away and focuses in a different area. And that would be a shame. It would be really important for us to have a true community outreach person in a situation the chief and I were involved in. It would have been good to have a proactive person out there in the community being aware of this situation and someone we could rely on. And so I would, if you have any voice or influence in that. Thanks, everybody. I took way more than 20 minutes.
Community
Community outreach liaison.
And just kind of, there've been a lot of conversations. I know before we met, we had some discussion, but Cody is definitely thinking about some different things. But one of the things that maybe we could do to speak to your point is maybe if the Inclusivity Board so chooses, and this will be something that we can talk about. Of course, we have our police chief. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient. Yeah, thanks for coming in. But maybe we look at the Inclusivity Board, just making a recommendation to honor the Indigenous peoples within our community and try to push that as a proclamation independently of any other effort. So.
Yeah, rightfully so. So I would support that 100%. Thank you, everybody, for the work you do and for depth and meaning of everything that you said and your courage to express yourself.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Don't be a stranger.
I appreciate it.
Leave, Armando.
Yeah. Hey.
See if he wants to go get something to
25
eat.
minutes left in the meeting, so I just want to hang out. No pressure, though.
No pressure. He's making a grand exit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like I thought I was going to get home today, but you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Here,
Yeah, no,
do
you're-
you need some dinner?
Yeah.
Cody was kicking me under the table to be quiet and
I
leave.
mean, I timed you and you went over it twice.
Yeah, I know. She was giving me looks. That's why I was going to leave.
It was.
That's how our
it
meetings
was
usually
neat.
go.
Yeah. It was neat.
No, it's.
Police chief, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate the fact. I know you've got Civic Academy going on. I know you're probably in a little bit of a window break, so.
I played tag.
Made your rounds, made sure you were seen. You know, obviously, we know in the years, we've had, I think, a stronger partnership, and I'm gonna celebrate Miguel on this because Miguel has been a liaison that we've depended upon. I know that he was part of a shift and you've created a community effort to ensure we know that policing has been a challenge systemically across the nation. We know that systemically, there's a lot of inherent racism that is explicit in a lot of parts of official organizations, including policing. And we also know that a lot of our community members are afraid of police. And I know that's one of the powers and efforts you're trying to do is to flip that and become more about resource and community. But we've also had some very, very frank and heated conversations about problems and how persons of color, persons who are trans, persons who do not fit the sort of privilege aspect, the profile of white male or white female, quote unquote. That there's a lot more instances of, you know, conflict and challenge and violence. So we really appreciate you being here, and not to I guess there's that heaviness, but I know we've done a lot of work, and if you wanted to just kind of share out and talk through a little bit about
Sure.
how you're continuing to do outreach for community. And again, I think that the big key is for us, how can we help you in that effort?
I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Absolutely. And I appreciate that introduction, but I also, on the flip side and, being here to talk about what we're doing, but also to get feedback of what else we can be doing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't obviously end tonight in this conversation. So I absolutely appreciate the opportunity to be here. Every other month, I do have to admit that I steal Miguel, and he comes to another meeting that I have, the Chiefs Community Advisory Panel. That was impaneled by the previous chief, but one of those things when I had the opportunity to take over, I continued. And it's been eye-opening, and it's been one of those things I wasn't sure, some of those things when you're not a piece of it, when from the ground up and you're like, ooh, how's this going to work? And it's absolutely been educational, eye-opening for me. I think, and I hope it goes both ways, but I would also say the goal of it is to be a cross-section of the community. Obviously, we're not going to have representation from every single individual group there, but to have a cross-section of the community where we can have adult conversations of here's what we did. Some of the things end up being training. We'll talk about our internal affairs processes. When somebody calls in and complains, we talk about the body worn cameras and how we don't have access to those. We can't go in and, oh, this got deleted. And there's, those talking about integrity, talking about transparency and those types of things. But some of it too is discussing calls that were in the media, that were in the news, and go, here's what you heard. Here's what we can share about this investigation. How did we do? And having those candid, just the adult conversations where there are emotions depending on what it is, but understanding, what is your expectation from the police department? What do you expect to hear on the news? Obviously you probably don't want to see your police chief on the news every night at 10 o'clock because I'm guessing things aren't going too well at that point in time. But at the same time, for no information to ever come out and you go, what are they doing? There's got to be a happy medium and what it is. And I'm sure it's a sliding scale depending on the event, depending on what the community expectations are, and so that has been a huge, it was a big challenge for me initially, but I embraced it and absolutely am blessed to be in that position. And God forbid everything happens to what I'm doing now. That would be one thing that I would absolutely miss because it's one of those things every other month that I enjoy and I can't wait to do because it's just it's eye-opening and it is just the adult healthy conversation of here it is, like it, love it, hate it. Let's talk about it. How can we do better? So appreciate that. So I appreciate Miguel being there and doing that. With the position of a police department in the city, when you don't like the grocery store, you get treated bad at the grocery store, you go to a different grocery store. You have many to choose from. When you call 911, what do you get? So we have an obligation and an opportunity to serve you, and we need to do that to anybody and everybody that calls the police department. Doesn't matter the race, doesn't matter the wealth, the fame, whatever it is, you deserve the best service that we can give. And so part of that, I think, is on us as a government entity to learn more about our community, to be more resourceful. And so one of the things just kind of, we reestablished a couple of the liaison programs that we had initially. We have a Hmong officer that is very influential in the Hmong community. And so he is our Hmong liaison officer. And there's a couple folks in the Hmong and Laotian community that reach out to me from time to time. And I call Tommy and I say, hey, tell me about this. Tell me about this. Tell me about this culture. Tell me about how these things work in some of these things. We also have detectives that are liaisons to the Spanish speaking community. They'll also understand that covers many cultures, so it's one of those baby steps, starting off. We've also recently started a liaison program with the LGBTQ community. So we've been up to Boulder County, received some training up there. We've partnered with Jefferson County. I refer to it as Jefferson County, but it's the first judicial district. So it's Jefferson and Gilpin counties, but working with their agencies, again, to have those liaisons. But the idea of having those liaisons obviously is for the community members. They have that outreach, that person there on our end that could help them work through different things. But it's also a piece where I look at these folks they're going to be able to train the rest of us. Here are things that you may say. Here are things that you may do. Here are things that might be offensive. Here are things, however it is, to better serve the community. And when we have 120,000, I don't want to overpopulate the city, but 120,000 people, and somebody calls the police department, whether they're traveling through the city, whether they work here and they don't live here or they live here, we have a duty and an obligation to provide the best service for those folks. God forbid something happens within our city. So that is some of the things we're doing just on the front end, kind of surface in the one sense, but putting our foot out there and trying to do the right thing and to engage those community groups. We're also making efforts to diversify our workforce. A couple of things that we're doing there as it relates to that is we have sent folks to different military installations to do recruiting there. Now, on the surface, it's, well, okay, you're getting veterans. But what we have found is in those military installations, there is a much more diverse population than there is across the United States. Gaining traction there. And then the other thing that we've also done is I've tasked some of our former athletes to go back to the schools that they were on scholarship and played baseball, basketball, softball, whatever it is in those schools, and reach out to their athletic director, because the folks that are on scholarship are a much more diverse community within that school, and less than 1% of those people will go on to play pro sports. But I see value in everybody. I don't want to mistake my words there. But looking at those folks, they understand teamwork. They understand hard work. They understand what it takes to accomplish things in some of those settings, which are things that we can use on the police force. So those are some of the things that we're doing to better engage our community, to engage and hire a more diverse workforce and to understand what is out there. And so wanted to be in front of you to introduce myself and like I said, I know some of my meetings conflict with this, but getting over here, so I apologize it's taken so long, but to introduce myself, let you know some of the things that we are doing, but also, reach out to you and to see if you have opportunities, ideas, things that we can do as it relates to diversity, inclusion, and equity, but also service. We're servants at heart. And obviously we're humans. We will absolutely make mistakes, but part of my job is to make sure that we own it, that we learn from it, and that we move on, and that we don't make the same mistake twice. So if there are service issues, regardless of race, gender, all those labels that we put on people, if there are things that we can be doing better, things that you see out in the community, I will give you my card. You guys will have that. Reach out to me and let me know, because I'd be more than happy to have those discussions with you, because like I said, we have a duty and an obligation to our community. When you call 911, you don't get a choice. You don't get a choice of who responds, whether that officer like him or her or not. You don't have that opportunity. And if you don't like the Westminster Police Department, I can guarantee you the Jefferson County Sheriff or the Adams County Sheriff's not going to come to your house. So appreciate the opportunity, and I would open it up to.
I wonder, how do you interface with PD? Because, go ahead.
So I'm a resource for the city.
Uh-huh.
And different departments engage me in different ways. And the chief, if he has a need that where I can help, I'll be there for him if that's in training or however they need. And he's got a full agenda. But I'm making introductions to him for training. I'm inviting him, he doesn't know yet, to a gala that a community group here called Servicios de la Raza that serves 70,000 Latinos every year, to invite him to that gala and his partner if he wishes. So it's really, we have a working relationship on one situation with a resident that's ongoing, and we have each other's speed dials.
But do you do things that, so to understand the culture better? Now, you've been with West DPD for, I don't know, a million years or something.
Feels like it, 24.
Yeah.
24.
So you've seen how the community, has it changed? Maybe it hasn't changed. I think we're still like 85% white in the community.
I just have the fact sheet up.
So I don't want to, I'll mess up the facts, but what I would say, so Armando and I, like he said, we became fast friends over a situation, and we're still working through that situation with that group. But it's been eye-opening, but it's also been one of those deals where, the relationship and where that's going to go, I mean, it's going to go great places. What I would tell you is some of the things that Armando has discussed and talked about in some of our trainings with the executive leadership team or the department heads has been eye-opening, because, in part of that is me. We have been through a lot of change in policing the last few years, some good, some bad. I mean, and depending on your view of different things. But there's also been a lot of change internally in culture and some of the things that we went through with an investigation within the police department. And there's been a lot of apple carts tipped over, if you will. And so part of my responsibility to my employees is change management. And I can't implement, here's 100 changes and you're going to like it. It's figuring out when to tip over that apple cart. It's figure out when to put the apples back and to go, okay, we're good here. Let's move on to the next one and manage some of that change. So in doing that, some of the things I've taken some of the materials Armando's given me, and I've given that to command staff. And one of the specific examples talking about how our society has changed within Westminster. So and Armando may know off the top of his head, but when you look at our society, you're talking about 85%, if that's truly the fact, 85%, 79% Caucasian. If you go to Westminster High School, so we have officers at Westminster High School, part of our school resource officers, less than 15%.
Right.
Are Caucasian. Yeah. That is a monumental shift. So it's incumbent upon me to understand those populations in the schools and making sure, do we have the appropriate resources there for those folks to make sure that they are comfortable in reaching out to us. And part of that is making sure that our command staff understands, hey, look, when we're talking about some of these things, it's not bad. It's called change. And if nothing else, for years, it's like technology. We haven't changed. But I think, in my opinion, we are changing, not always for the better, but we are changing at a much more rapid pace. And so part of that for me internally is making sure that I manage that change, because I also need a productive and fruitful workforce that's out there, but I also need them to understand what the community needs and wants in that piece of it. So I've taken some of those things that Armando has given us and started laying that groundwork. So when Armando comes in, it's not the shock and awe of, we're doing what? It's, yeah, we talked about that. Well, yeah, that is different. We know that. Well, good. Here's some more.
And how diverse is the?
Well, we do have some other questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had Seth and then Michelle and then Jillian and then Miguel.
I'm in there too, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So I just wanted to ask, have you got anything going on with mental health and neurodiversity and things like that? Because it seems like there's a lot of incidents that have ended up in the news where there's a bad interaction between police officers and somebody who's not neurotypical and doing well.
Making sure I understand that word correctly,
Yeah.
neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Somebody that and maybe I'm using the incorrect terms, but somebody that might be in mental or behavioral crisis.
No, neurodiversity is just, people who have ADHD, autism, OCD, all kinds of other things that are not necessarily a mental health problem, but something that the fact that society, that you don't, your life, your brain does not match up to society's expectations causes problems.
Sure. Okay. So we do get some basic training in some of those areas where we look to and rely heavily on is our co-responder program.
Okay.
Now, again, the co-responders are more specific to some folks in crisis, but they also have the education, they're licensed clinicians, they have some of the educational background and other opportunities that they can bring into us to help us educate our workforce. But we do rely heavily on them. When that program began for us about 3 years ago, most of the officers kind of looked cross-eyed at us going, "You're going to do what?" And now there's panic in the streets when they're not working.
Yeah.
What do you mean? So it's been a huge change for us, and one of the many changes, 180 degrees. It's been one of the best things that we've ever done. I think it provides a better service for our residents. It also reduces the liability for the police department and ultimately the city.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Well, Michelle, please.
So, so you talk about change management, which is prioritization. So like, what would you say are some of the biggest things that you've done since you took over for Chief Carlson?
I would say some of the biggest things is making sure that the employees internally know that they are valued, that they are cared for, that they're respected. And that I guess my belief in that is if you're my employee and I mistreat you, however that may be, how do I hold you accountable for your actions on the street? Because my expectation is that you treat people out there, not everybody, and pardon me, this is the analogy I use. Not everybody has a parent that they like. Most everybody loves their grandparents. So my message to new folks when they come in is I want you to treat people like your grandparents. If your grandparent were to walk in the front door, if they were to call, if their car were to get broken into, I want you to treat them like your grandparents. If you're treating people like you would treat your grandparents, we're probably going to be okay. But I can't hold you to that expectation of people treating people with dignity and respect if I'm not doing the same thing. So I need to make sure, and that's probably been the biggest thing for me, is making sure that they understand I'm there to support them. Got to hold them accountable, but I'm there to support them. I'm there to help them gain their future through training, through education, through opportunities within the police department to make sure that they know that they're supported. They're going to be held accountable, but I can't hold them to those standards if I'm not doing the same thing. The other piece that I think is imperatively important, especially this day and age, but it's always been important, is being there. You know, if I'm texting you every day, you know, there's still that need for that human interaction. So I need to be there in roll call, down in records, in the crime lab from time to time, not every day, but to make sure that you know that I'm there, that I know you by name, and that we can have that conversation. Hey, how's your mom? How's your dog? How are those things? So there's that communication, that human interaction. That's the biggest piece for me, because what my thought process is what I emulate to the employees, they need to be emulating out in the community. And if I'm not doing that in-house, I can't expect that from them out there. And that is my expectation out there. That is probably the biggest change. That's probably the biggest change that I would say internally that we've implemented, and folks know that I'm going to make mistakes. Absolutely. You know, but it's the communication, owning it, and being there when something's going to change. And I know this is going to tip over the apple cart. They're not going to be happy. I'm front and center. Here's what we're doing. Here's why. Here's how this is a good thing. Let me have it.
I'll have one question after everybody else gets their chance,
Okay.
just to go back to
Sure.
something specific.
Thank you. Jillian, she doesn't have her mic on, so I'll read that question. Is or will there be a policy for officers displaying articles of faith or creed affiliation while on duty? For instance, while she's never had a negative experience with Westminster Police Department, She has seen some wearing Blue Lives Matter regalia, and she would imagine that if, she was a Black mother, or if I was a Black person and I saw Blue Lives Matter, it frankly undermines the fact that, there's a systemic issue that we talked about earlier toward people of color. So she just wondered about a policy. Is there a policy about that, like while on duty, or will there be a policy like that? And I guess that also goes for persons of faith. If I'm wearing something that signifies my faith as a person who may have a different faith, and Jillian, you can correct me in the messaging if I'm wrong. I may not be as open to sharing or being vulnerable with maybe some issue that I have.
Sure. Generally speaking, and see if I can, I think I understand the question. There might be a couple little pieces here that I'll dive into. So as it relates to Blue Lives Matter, I'm not aware, and we would not promote or have that on police cars, on the uniform, that type of thing. But I would also say Blue Lives Matter, depending on what artifact they are looking for, or this is in reference to, there's also the flag with the thin blue line. That is a completely different piece or artifact than Blue Lives Matter. The flag with the blue line is the thin blue line, which represents for our industry the fine line between peace and chaos. And that actually comes from it started with a red thin line on a flag based off of other military battles back in the Celtic days. So that is what that blue line flag means. Now, the blue line flag is a representation of what we stand for, not Blue Lives Matter. Two completely different things. My perspective on that, all lives matter. Doesn't matter faith, any of that stuff. All lives matter. There is value in every human being that walks the face of the earth. So as it relates to that, we don't have a specific policy that calls that out. We have tattoo policies, those types of things. So if there are offensive or questionable tattoos that somebody may have, they have to cover those up. So we don't allow that. Generally speaking, in a uniform, we dictate what they do and don't wear. So people can wear rings. They can wear some jewelry as it relates to ears. Outside of that, we usually don't allow too many, I'll say, personal artifacts that might be divisive, or that might paint us into a corner as it relates to service, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay, Jillian, if you have follow-up, please type. Miguel, please. Thank you.
Just a quick comment. I like to commend Chief for his being open-minded and listening. I think that's been a big shift I've seen since probably the George Floyd era of policing, and even the city of Westminster policing. I think George Floyd's the unfortunate situation put a lot of pressure, obviously, from the public on police departments. But I think police departments kind of started feeling it on their own too. They couldn't just ignore it and say, hey, we're not one of them. They had to kind of say, hey, they were probably saying that too. And then it happened. And then what, right? So it became like this looking inward a little bit more. I think, every time we have the community advisory panels, they're actively wanting to hear some feedback from a different perspective. And I think that goes a long way. Probably in the upcoming months, we're going to look back at that large investigation report that was published on what happened around the police department with George Floyd. We're going to probably have some tough conversations, but you got to check in with yourself. No one wants to be in that situation. And I'm not saying the city will never be in that situation. It could happen, but I think they really want to do what they can to prevent something like that happening in that culture, in the department. And then lastly, he touched on it. It's becoming harder to find police officers. It's no longer just like there's this, this line of people gung-ho to do it. It's becoming really hard. So they're challenged. They're having to attract people to the job, and it's very competitive and fiercely competitive across all other departments and locally, and then across the nation, probably start to be internationally at some point. So you got to be attractive to some buddy to get them to work for you. And it's gonna have to it's gonna eventually be different type of people. I mean, you touched on it with the city of Westminster High School. So things are changing. And I feel like our department, I feel comfortable to say this, is like open to this and maybe even on the forefront at times, even before I've seen the city be on actually taking feedback, changing and actually, setting a path forward that's different than the norm. Sorry to
Appreciate that.
not to play on
No
it.
pun intended. Yeah.
Okay.
With Michelle's. And you had the.
So I just have one question. It was just about a policy that was in place back. I did the Citizens Academy in 2017.
Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Well, thank you for providing it, by the way. It was amazing. And I have recommended it to my fellow board members.
Next one starts.
Time and time again.
First, no pressure.
Yeah. But I mean, there were a couple of things at the time that I noticed that were a little unpalatable. But there was one thing that I noticed at that time that was policy is that you would have officers in rotation around the city. So they wouldn't necessarily be in one area and get to know everybody in that area. Has that policy changed?
It
Has that
has.
practice changed?
It has.
Good.
So,
Okay.
it started when I became deputy chief in patrol. And there's like anything, it's a double-edged sword. One of the negatives on that is if you are new to our city as a new employee, you might be in one area for a long time, which can create disadvantages when you're needing to get somewhere else and you're like, I have no idea where that's at. Now, Google helps. Doesn't always work. Even when it's an emergent call, you don't always have that luxury.
Correct.
So a new employee, we still encourage the supervisors to rotate them around to get to know the city as a whole. But one of the things that I started and that we've continued is having officers work certain areas, a majority of their work week. So if the work week is 4 days a week, at least 2, preferably 3, sometimes 4, depending on what it is. Again, kind of accommodating for some of those new folks to get in there and do that. Couple of things there with that. I think it's important. I think it's as an officer, and that was my bread and butter. I worked the road. I didn't spend time in investigations. It was not my thing. Wanted to be out there where the excitement was. But I couldn't provide a good service if I was in your neighborhood today, I'm in your neighborhood tomorrow, and I'm in your neighborhood the next day. And it's like, what's normal in this neighborhood? Is that car supposed to be there? Is that business supposed to be open? Who's working that business? And when you work those areas of town, because when I started, you bid by seniority, your areas of town that you worked. And so when you worked, I worked down the 72nd and Sheridan area on graveyards for years. Loved it. But I could walk into 7-Eleven, I could walk into Walmart, I could walk into the motel and go, hey, Miguel, how you doing? How's this? Have those conversations, but I knew what normal was and was not. So when the lights were off at the motel or the lights, it's like, what's going on? What did they close? Well, no. Okay, somebody gets sick. So it allowed you to be, in my opinion, a better officer for that neighborhood. But it also goes back to not only knowing the locations and what's normal and not, but you start to learn the people. And when you learn the people, that's what we're here for, is that engagement piece of it. Because if you know me, then you can trust me. If you don't know me, you're not going to trust me. And that's where it starts. And so building that just at the ground level of knowing me if you know me, and you don't have to know everything about me, but if you know, hey, that's Norm, that's Officer Howard, whatever that relationship is, you could start to develop that trust. If you have the trust, then we can have some of those more difficult conversations, whatever that may be, but have that relationship. But you have to start with getting to know each other first. So yes, changed in 2020 when I took over the patrol division, and we still continue that today. Again, little caveats depending on personnel needs and educating our workforce, but yes.
Thank you for doing that, because that was the one thing that I thought was just making things worse, is having that revolving door of faces rather than engaging with your neighborhood, with your role, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm like,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound right, but okay.
Yeah.
Good, remembered. But thank you.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Chief Houghton, Mr. Martin, thank you so much for your time and energy
Thank
and we'd love to continue. Obviously, Miguel is an amazing representative for us, but we definitely want to continue to support your work. Thank you for all the work you're doing. We all know that, you know, life is about continuous improvement. We'll continue to improve. And I definitely would love to have a little bit of a conversation with you as a follow-up, like at some point. So if you have cards or we can get those, that would be fantastic.
I can also send out your stuff.
Will you do
and follow
that?
up.
Yes,
Yeah, that'd be
Then
great.
everybody has.
because I'm sure I'll have,
Yeah.
I'll be one short.
Yeah. Thank you, guests. We appreciate it. And I know, board, we're past time, so if we could get through a couple of point items and then have a few action points, because I do want to at least have some action moving forward with the comment we made and also the outreach stuff that Michelle talked about. So, because I think that's important, and the more I listen, the more I just feel that that's exactly the right work. Not that it's, you know, my opinion doesn't really matter, but I support Michelle's thinking. And I know a lot of you do too. Really quickly going through old business, we have a reviewing and approving last month's meeting minutes. Do we have a motion? All right, moved. And is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Does anyone abstain? All right, so moved. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem's making that easy for us. Okay,
I can do 5 seconds. Strategic plan was updated, the current KPIs, not the plan, but just update on the KPIs. And that should be posted in the next couple of days, but was part of Monday night's packet.
would there be interest in having Inclusivity Board sponsor a proclamation to support Indigenous peoples?
Yes.
Okay. Would, I guess, would there be a motion to at least initiate that work, and maybe we can use some of the time next time to we could either do a subcommittee. I mean, we can discuss it if it's motioned and seconded. So is there a motion to? Okay,
I move that we recommend a proclamation honoring Indigenous people.
okay.
Second that.
All right, it's been motioned and seconded. Any discussion? All right, oh, Donna, thank you. Any discussion?
So is there a particular date that we look at that surrounds something specifically?
Mhm.
Yes?
I think it's celebrated in the month of November or October. Like Colorado has an Indigenous Peoples celebration day, so
Yes.
we can get those details. Yeah.
So if we
And
could,
there's proclamations throughout the state and I think neighboring states that are examples to start with.
could we carve out some time at the next meeting to start forging and drafting?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Can we also clarify, talking about recognizing Indigenous Peoples' Day on its own?
Yes.
Without reference to other,
They will, yeah, and we can, yep.
I know that's our intent. I just want to make sure it's on the record.
Yeah, there is no other, I didn't hear any other motion aligned to that. There's one motion for proclamation. So, okay. Any further discussion on that point? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain? So moved. Thank you. Michelle, I do want to give you a little bit of time to talk a little bit. I think framing what we're doing, we have money at least now. And I think that the heart of what you're going to say is we've got to get out into communities and we've got to do outreach for persons, right?
Yeah, basically.
So-
I mean, I think the idea that I would like to propose is something that can be done in sort of a short-term sort of scenario. It doesn't require a lot of development because it's already being done by other cities in the metro region. And basically, we already have like a neighborhood grant program, but that one's for beautification purposes. There are other cities near us, Arvada is a great example, where they have a neighborhood grant program, which is inclusive of both beautification or art projects or things like that, but also for neighborhood gatherings. And I feel that that's the one thing that's missing from what we do. And I know that the city already has their own budget that's allocated to the beautification projects. I feel like, our $8,000 budget is small. But in most cities, these grants are like $100 or less in some cases for depending upon what the application's for. So we could actually go quite a long way with $8,000. Summer is the optimal time to obviously do it. We're in Colorado, limited good weather. So, I'm hoping that this might be something that we could maybe even ask Cody to go to the city manager's office and basically say, can we give you guys our money to do a tack on to this existing program? Because I feel like time is of the essence and.
Oh, just for my clarification,
Sure.
sorry, to tack on to like pro slabs, so the PRLS board with their beautification grants, or because
Yeah,
it's not,
that's right. It is with PRL, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
because
So
they're not,
I guess it's kind of a little different, huh?
right, but I would also say pro slab has the.
Yeah, the process.
They have like our à la carte, all the trailers where you can take a trailer to a park.
Okay.
It's like movie nights are having all the trailers, so our à la carte and whatever the activity, there's like 3 or 4 of them.
Yep.
They also have that.
Okay, great.
Plus they have an application process and all that. I don't know where they are in it, but maybe I can talk to that.
Or maybe
And see what that looks like.
just even propose to the staff that manage that particular program and see if they have some ideas on how it can be applied. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied exactly to the art à la carte, but I think is a great example.
They have other things that would, like, if you program it, people will show up as opposed to.
Right, exactly. But there'll be some people like,
Have a party.
yeah, exactly. But like, the idea would be to propose it to be gather your neighbors together.
So there's another, sorry, just thought of.
Oh, go for it.
Because Chief Hubbard just left.
Yep.
But National Night Out is also happening. That's an August activity.
Yep.
And they do it organically, neighborhoods organize specifically to organize themselves, but also law enforcement comes to all of those. I wonder if there's something there that could be used, or maybe it's like, come out for National Night Out and then, we'll support your next one, or I don't know. I'm trying to find a way to think efficiently
Or we can provide food
yeah.
or something.
Yeah, exactly.
This funding.
So is National Night Out organized by the PD or is it?
It's a national event that that neighborhoods and communities who've done it before are sort of already aware, and it's
Okay.
planned, like it's got a date years and,
Right.
ahead. They don't plan it, but they participate. Does that make sense? And they sort of, I know they track, they ask people to tell them when they're, if they're having a party so that they can stop by.
Okay, so it is a truly voluntary thing that they
Yeah.
report to the national organization that does it.
They report local. So like Sherry Spot, he's one of our PIOs.
Right.
So like if they were doing something at Peter Pan Park, they'd call Sherry and, oh,
So
having a
it's
park.
coordinated in a sense through
Right.
PD.
Yeah, I mean, they're planning their own, so everyone's different.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll have bigger ones, like fire's gone out and stuff. And so sometimes they have bigger, or if it's a bigger neighborhood park or bigger area who's doing it, they'll sometimes have like the police,
We have to hustle.
Batmobile and things like that. Is it August 1st? But I can ask questions that I can do tomorrow afternoon.
And then also, obviously, I mean, if we are allowed, because I don't even know if we have any specific rules around how we spend our budget. I just want
You
to.
don't, you just
No.
say $8,000.
Perfect, okay.
We did, as long as it's
But
aligned to the strategic.
But just so you know, it's this year and
Yeah.
that it's.
Oh, no, exactly.
We don't have it for
If
2020.
if we can say. that-
Ideally, I'd like to do it this summer.
Right. Oh, yeah, that'd
Because
be
I
awesome.
do feel like the city is on a bit of a roll. I mean, the newsletters are more frequent. We are seeing a little bit more communication. Like I feel like I'm a little bit more in the loop organically
Mhm.
rather than through my service here on the board. And so I feel like now would be a warm iron.
Donna, I see your hand. I want to make sure if you had something to add.
Yes, my question would be, and it probably, but also the community would like to do these activities. Could we by then? I'm not sure. Could we buy or some, a Cody, you know,
Donna, your audio is really choppy and we can't really hear what you're saying.
well, not sure what's going on.
Yeah, Don, I'm sorry. We were kind of getting every other word,
Oh.
but
Yeah.
can you maybe, do you have access to the chat? Could you type that question in? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Awesome.
Because it sounded like it was going to be a good suggestion.
Yeah.
There was some good ideas, Donna, so.
And while Donna's doing that, obviously, we're at crunch time.
Yeah.
In a lot of different ways.
Yep.
But this is important. And so, and obviously August 1st is coming up. I think we'll get some maybe clarification
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I can, so I'm at training all day tomorrow, but I'll see if I can do something in the afternoon or send some things out tonight. So I'll have something tomorrow. Yeah.
Michelle, could you and I and whoever else wanted to be interested, get together and like maybe hash out what we could do if Inclusivity Board decides this would be something that we would want to do? Because I think we can make an official motion to have a subcommittee and then we can work through it.
Perfect.
So,
Right.
if anyone wants to.
I will move to form a subcommittee to discuss ways to put our budget to use.
Okay.
Just leave it very broad.
Okay, that has been motioned.
Neighborhoods are.
Ways to use our $8,000 budget to use. Okay, that is seconded. Any discussion? I know Donna's going to have a suggestion coming through, so I do want to honor that. Is there any questions or thoughts or anything while we're waiting for that suggestion?
I guess there's no budget next year. Is that, just want to make sure.
At this point, that's what we're proposing that we're trying to tighten our belt. So that's one of the things that'll go, that ours and EAB probably won't have dollars.
What's the fiscal year?
January.
Okay. Mine is September.
We're also not hiring
Yeah,
a
hiring
whole bunch of
Frost.
those sorts of things. Yeah,
Okay.
no new positions.
This
We
is
are
due-
hiring, there's no new.
Do you have the budgets for the other boards or, and?
I think we're one of the only ones that has funding,
Oh.
us and the Environmental Advisory Board. I think we're the only, and ProSlab does that neighborhood grant, but we're the only three, we're also the only three advisory boards. So,
Other than Human Services.
but
That's their specific.
that's their function,
Interesting enough, their budget hasn't gone up in
right?
years.
Years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they have more needs now than
Yep.
they have
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if anything, I want to
Yeah.
push that.
Donna said, would the retirement community where I live be able to request funds for programs such as Michelle's suggestion?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yes. Definitely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
So, okay. Any other discussion before we officially move?
Miguel asked for something by email.
Oh.
Wanted to share an article. Maybe we could discuss how it could work in Westminster. Great article and perspective on effective approach to rehousing the unhoused. So we could put that on August if you guys are all okay with that. Oh, but you won't be here in August.
Great.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I don't think I need to be here.
Okay.
I'm not like an expert on that.
And then just as a reminder, the housing study is due at the end of the year. So,
This is, but we're on voting.
oh, sorry.
No
Oh, sorry.
worries. Yeah, no
Okay.
worries. No worries. Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Zach.
I was like, okay, I'll get there. Okay, so we have had discussion, all in favor of the motion of exploring how we're going to use that $8,000 through subcommittee?
Yes.
All right.
Is there anyone opposed? Does anyone abstain? So moved. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Who are the committee members? Justin, Michelle?
Yep.
Put me on that.
Miguel, okay.
Thank you.
And I've got flexibility next week.
I'm pretty flexible myself, so. Yep.
Thursday and Friday. Sorry, my mom's having knee surgery. So I'm out.
No worries. No worries.
So, yeah.
And I think, is there a continued discussion on the, Blue Desert situation?
That's a council initiative that staff is working on.
So an update to the board would be good probably because
They have one right now, but I can ask.
that would be great.
Actually, look in the KPIs.
Okay.
It just, that will hopefully.
And then for those in Southwest Minster, which I think where the problem, they're kind of rooted, the dollar store is moving.
Oh. Oh.
So, to my knowledge, up to 72nd Sheridan. So which isn't far, but like further away from kind of that dead zone there, quote unquote dead zone where it's like everything left. So is something maybe to continue the conversation about,
You know,
not that the dollar store is like,
it's interesting because when I think it was Chief said, you know, if you don't like the grocery store, you go to another grocery store. And it's like, yeah, if you have a grocery store.
if you have it.
I mean, and it is something we have to keep that.
Yeah, if you have a vehicle and
Yeah,
a bank account.
right. So, that's a privilege to go to select grocery stores.
They just said in process.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Um,
I know they were doing a study in with growing home, and so that might still be economic development and growing home.
Good.
all right.
That's great.
We are
Yeah,
way past time, but
Yeah.
I think this has been really some exceptional information, some really good thinking. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you for just the different perspectives. And thank you all for your service. It does feel like we're definitely moving things, but we just have to keep that momentum. I think,
Yep.
keep the iron hot, right?
Yep.
While it's there.
Yep.
Donna, thank you for joining us. Jillian, I know, was here. She had to leave. Our guests, Sarah and Janelle, I'm sorry I didn't get to officially welcome you when you first came in. We were in the middle of a discussion, but thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our meeting this evening. We are at, thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. We appreciate you and your support as well. We are at 7:50, so we will officially adjourn. Thank you all.
Got a couple minutes?
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Hang up.
so my wife